Well, let's move on to our third topic this week, which is this roadmap to recovery. And lots of very excited people on social media this week talking about the 21st of June, when apparently this is all going to be over and it's going to be like the last days of the Roman Empire out there. I dread to think what our local high street's going to look like as pub kicking out time, etc., on that night. But we have now some dates. They're targets, I think it's fair to say. So we shouldn't pin too much hope on each of them actually happening. But at least we have a bit of a vision for what the future might look like. And it's four steps. The first step has two mini steps in it, so step 1A and 1B. And lots of parents I've been speaking to very, very excited. On Monday week, their kids are going back to school. I'm not convinced that's going to be an entirely smooth transition, by the way, particularly with secondary schools, because they have to test in school 3 times their secondary age children, and the logistical challenge, speaking to some sort of senior leaders at schools I know, the logistical challenges of doing that testing is huge. Yeah, really significant, shouldn't be underestimated. And then afterwards, those kids are going to have to be tested at home twice a week. And our middle child is terrified at that prospect of having to stick something up her nose twice a week. She really doesn't like the idea. But if we're thinking about the personal finance and economic implications of this roadmap, getting the schools back frees up working parents. And of course, working parents at the moment are trapped between a rock and a hard place. They're having to do supervise online and remote education and work remotely from home in many cases if they've not been furloughed. But that's just step one. We've got other ones as well. Were you cheering? Were you jumping for joy when you heard that roadmap?
I was a little bit, I have to say, because I fully expected this to kind of go on and on and on, and September to be the moment
Mm,
where they were like, okay, life is going to pretty much get back to normal. Everything is opening faster than
mm,
I thought. I mean, for me, the key date is the 12th of April. And the reason that that is the key date is because this is when your pubs, your kind of hospitality type stuff, plus your non-essential retail can open up again. With the caveat, I think that you're still not allowed to drink inside in pubs
right.
in on the 12th of April, if I remember properly. But that to me is the big moment that life really, really changes, because these first two steps, I think we've got the early March, like you say, the kids back to
Mm.
school, and then being able to meet one other individual outside for a coffee or whatever. I have to say, I thought you were already allowed to do that.
I think most people do. Judging by the number, I went for a walk around our village yesterday, and judging by the number of people who had stopped on benches and are having coffees and stuff, again, maybe that's the announcement and people thinking, well, it's going to happen soon anyway, so I'll get away with it now. But yeah, the rule of six comes back in on the 29th of March, so that will
Yes,
favour it.
that's a big one as well. And I think also within that, there's the two
Two
households that
households, yeah.
can mix regardless of their size. So
Mm.
that's exciting. But in terms of what we can do and where we can go, we're still a little bit stunted. I think you can hang out in your
Yeah.
garden at that point, but it's not like, you can go to your favorite place and spend your money, whatever. So for me, the major date is the 12th of April.
Mm.
And I think that is the moment where a lot of these businesses that we've talked about that are desperate for some cash are going to get quite a lot. I think a lot of people will go and they'll have takeaway pints. They'll go and sit in beer gardens. I've already got friends that are booking out beer gardens actually. So
Okay.
they're definitely not short of punters. I wouldn't think, but I am excited to get moving and kind of get back to seeing friends and get life going again.
Yeah, I mean, the economic recovery aspects of this is going to depend on how much of a blowout we have, not just initially, so not just going out on the 12th of April, 17th of May, 21st of June, but how sustained that is for the rest of this year. Because I think when the non-essential retailers open, which is the 12th of April date, yeah, we can go out and we can hopefully spend some of this money that we've saved up during the pandemic, because we've not been going out drinking and clubbing and on holiday, etc. Like I go drinking or clubbing, but anyway, on holiday. So we've saved some money during that time, but how much of that will actually get released into the economy at that point, and for how long will we remain optimistic and cheerful? As you said, a lot of this depends on the vaccine rollout. It depends on these mutant viral strains not cropping up and not being resistant to the vaccination program. And that's why there's this gap, this 5 week gap between each of these steps. So 4 weeks to see what the implication of opening up another part of the economy was, and then a week to analyse the data and for the government to decide, I guess, to take it for a vote in the House of Commons as well, for Parliament to decide whether or not they move on to step 2, step 3, step 4. So they are target dates. I'm fairly optimistic we're going to continue looking at the data coming from the vaccines, looking at the progress of the vaccination program. I think we all want it to happen. I think that's what it's about, don't we? We all want to hit these deadlines, and just be able to go for a walk with my parents, but both my parents at the same time will be lovely. But we'll see.
We will see. I think I slightly mentioned this earlier, but wanted to save the proper point to now because it's more relevant. I actually think, assuming no terrible mutant variant of coronavirus happens, so we're working on that principle, I think this is going to be some sort of kind of roaring 20s type years again. And I think, as you say, people have saved up. I don't think they should be encouraged to spend that money. I think it should be a personal choice, because I think ultimately the personal finance of the individual is more important, particularly, I should caveat that, particularly for people that haven't typically been able to save. I would say it's more important to hold on to those savings than it is to worry about propping up the economy. I don't think that's not your job to think about. Your job is to save money. But I think for many of us that have saved money, there is going to be a lot of just having so much fun, because people are desperate for it. And to that point, I think hospitality will do very, very well. I think the pubs might have their best ever summer, assuming everything's okay. And I think travel will do phenomenally well. The area I think will perhaps not do so well is retail. And that's because coronavirus, as we've talked about before, has really sent people online that previously weren't online. Now, that's not to say that people are suddenly never going to go back to the high street. And my parents, for instance, always shop on the high street. They've done more online shopping, but I think the preferred method is still the high street, and it will remain that way. But because people have been exposed to more online shopping, inevitably they will continue to do so to at least a certain extent, because it's so convenient. So if I were a retailer, I wouldn't necessarily be jumping for joy. I would still have a lot of concerns going forward. And I think coronavirus probably has really, really accelerated the death of the high street, and maybe some of the stories that we'll see coming up in the next 24-ish months might be how we're going to be reshaping high streets so that there's more property around and available for people to help solve the housing crisis that's ongoing at the moment. Community centres, leisure centres, all sorts going on in that respect. So I think it's going to be a cracking year, and maybe cracking 2 years for certain industries that have suffered massively. But I'm not so sure about retail. I think things are looking not good for them in the long run.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. Hannah, thank you for joining us for another episode of Talking Money. We'll speak to you again next week, when hopefully we've got some fun stuff to talk about in the budget. We'll see how that goes on Wednesday, and then hopefully have a bit of a reaction to it as well. You can find show notes and useful links, etc. at icradio.co.uk. Please do subscribe. Please do leave us a rating and review as well. If you're listening to this via your favourite podcast player, then click on the album artwork, leave a rating, leave a review there. And if you're watching us on YouTube, as many people choose to do, then please do press like as well. That really, really helps us with the YouTube algorithm, so more people get to see our videos. And over 500 people watched us having a little rant last week about Neil Woodford, which was lovely. So that's a really positive. So do press like, do subscribe to the channel as well, so you don't miss any future videos. Hannah, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.